Stop scrolling. This is the moment everything shattered. The second a quiet father felt the world tilt, and something ancient woke up inside him. If you've ever loved someone so fiercely that fear turns into fire, stay with me. Because this story does not blink. I was closing the garage when my phone rang, vibrating like a warning. My daughter's name flashed, then disappeared. A voicemail followed, shaky, breathless, cut short by a sound I still hear in my sleep. I drove without thinking, red lights melting into streaks, my hands locked on the wheel like it was the last solid thing left. The playground looked normal from a distance. That lie lasted 3 seconds. Parents stood frozen. A circle had formed. In the center, my daughter sat on the ground, knees pulled to her chest, jacket torn, eyes empty in a way no child's eyes should ever be. A man stood nearby, arguing loudly, waving his hands as if volume could rewrite what he'd done. Someone said, "It was just a misunderstanding." Another said, "Let's calm down." I felt calm in the way ice feels calm right before it cracks. I knelt beside her. She didn't cry. She whispered my name, and that whisper landed heavier than any scream. I wrapped my coat around her shoulders and felt her shaking, each tremor carving something permanent into me. The man kept talking. Excuses stacked on excuses. I didn't hear words anymore. I heard a boundary being crossed and a line being erased. Security arrived late. Police sirens echoed earlier than their steps. Questions flew. Statements were taken. Time stretched and thinned. I answered politely, mechanically, because I knew something no one else did. This wasn't over. Not by a form, not by a report, not by a promise that we'll look into it. That night, after the house went quiet and my daughter finally slept, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I replayed every second I wasn't there. Every door I didn't lock. Every warning I ignored because life had trained me to trust the ordinary. Rage came then. Not wild, not loud, but focused, heavy, patient. I didn't want revenge. I wanted certainty. I wanted my child to feel safe again. And I wanted the truth to come into the light, no matter who tried to bury it. This was the beginning, not the end, and what followed would test every rule I believed in. Outside, the streetlight flickered, and I realized something terrifying and clear. Protecting her would demand choices that comfort never requires, patience that anger cannot rush, and courage that asks a price up front. I exhaled slowly, stood up, and prepared to move forward. With resolve. Morning came without mercy. Sunlight slipped through the curtains like an intruder, exposing the mess inside my head. I made breakfast by muscle memory, eggs cooling untouched, coffee going bitter. My daughter sat at the table, hoodie pulled tight, eyes fixed on nothing. I spoke softly, promised school could wait, promised I would be close. She nodded, trusting me the way children do, and that trust became a weight I refused to drop. At the station, the interview room smelled of paper and disinfectant. A detective asked measured questions, writing slowly, as if careful ink could make the truth safer. I answered everything. Times, descriptions, the way the man's voice changed when challenged, the way bystanders hesitated. The detective said procedures mattered. I agreed. Procedures mattered to systems. Fathers measure time differently. I learned the man's name before noon. A neighbor from 3 streets over. No prior record worth mentioning. Cooperative, they said. Released pending review, they added. Words stacked neatly while my pulse knocked against my ribs. I thanked them and left, because gratitude is easier than arguing with walls. The rest of the day became a map of decisions. I called a lawyer and asked about protection orders. I called a counselor and scheduled sessions twice a week. I changed passwords, routes, routines. I taught my daughter a signal we could share in crowds. Preparation is love translated into action. By evening, rumors spread faster than facts. Messages buzzed with opinions dressed as concern. Some defended him, some doubted her. I blocked numbers without apology. Truth does not need an audience to be true. It needs guardians. Night returned. I checked locks. I checked windows. I sat outside her room until her breathing settled into sleep. That was when anger tried to rush me, urging shortcuts, whispering that fear could be solved with force. I let it pass. Rage is loud. Resolve is quiet. I chose quiet. I opened my notebook and began documenting everything. Dates, times, witnesses, contradictions. Patterns emerge when patience stays longer than fury. I planned to expose what had happened without becoming what the world expects angry fathers to be. Near midnight, a message arrived from an unknown number. Just 6 words. You should let this go. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. The threat wasn't the sentence. It was the assumption behind it. I saved the message, stood up, and understood the shape of the fight ahead. This would not be fast. It would be thorough. I turned off the light and made a vow that felt heavier than any oath. No matter how long it took, I would build safety, brick by brick, truth by truth, until no shadow could touch her again. The third day taught me how pressure really works. It doesn't crash in, it seeps. Reporters lingered near the school gates, pretending to check phones. Neighbors offered casseroles and questions. My daughter noticed everything, even when she said nothing. And I learned to answer with steadiness instead of speeches. The detective called after lunch. New statements conflicted. A witness changed their timeline. Security footage existed, but access required approvals. I thanked him again. After the call, I filed public records requests and scheduled meetings with the school board. Doors open when you knock politely and return with receipts. That afternoon, the man's lawyer reached out. A tone of courtesy wrapped a warning. They suggested mediation, confidentiality, and moving forward. I declined calmly, and asked that all contact go through counsel. When the call ended, my hands shook, not with fear but with clarity. Boundaries are built by saying no without apology. We practice small freedoms at home. My daughter chose dinner. She picked the movie. She laughed once, then apologized for it, as if joy needed permission. I told her it didn't. Healing isn't loud. It's a series of quiet yeses. Online, a narrative formed that favored convenience. Comments argued about intent, reputation, benefit of the doubt. I archived everything. Screenshots don't forget when people do. I learned who stood firm and who preferred comfort over courage. By evening, a breakthrough arrived. A parent I barely knew asked to talk. They brought a timeline and a memory they'd avoided because it felt messy. It fit, perfectly. We wrote it down, signed it, and I watched relief lift from their shoulders. Truth can be shared without spectacle. Before bed, my daughter asked a simple question. Are we safe? I told her the honest version. We are getting safer every day, she nodded, trusting the process because she trusted me. That night, I rehearsed tomorrow. I listed calls, routes, and witnesses, then slept lightly, listening for the house to settle. Dreams came in fragments, lockers, gravel, a hand reaching for mine. I woke steady. Dawn found me stretching patience like a muscle, slow and deliberate. I packed snacks, notes, and courage. I reminded myself that anger is energy, but direction is power. When doubt crept close, I answered with preparation. Every plan was a promise kept in advance. Every note was a shield. I wasn't hunting conflict. I was escorting truth to the door and holding it open until it walked through. Silence became discipline, and discipline became calm resolve that refused shortcuts, spectacle, or surrender under pressure. Publicly, patiently, daily forward. I sat back at the table, updated my notes, and prepared for the next step. Pressure had revealed its secret. It tests patience, not strength. And patience, once chosen, becomes unbreakable. The hearing room felt smaller than it looked, walls closing in with every shuffled paper. I sat behind my lawyer, spine straight, breathing slow, while the other side arranged smiles like armor. My daughter waited at home with her aunt, brave and tired, carrying a courage no child should need. The board chair called the case. Procedures marched forward. Timelines, policies. I spoke when invited, steady and factual, resisting the pull to perform. Evidence landed gently but firmly, messages saved, footage verified, statements aligned. Each piece clicked, not loudly but decisively. The room changed its posture. A question came meant to rattle me. I answered with dates. Another pressed emotion. I answered with process. Anger hovered, then faded, confused by calm. I wasn't there to win a scene. I was there to protect a future. During a break, the man avoided my eyes. His lawyer whispered urgently. A settlement reappeared, sweeter than before, layered with conditions. I declined again. Truth does not bargain with silence. It stands or it falls. When the session resumed, the chair read preliminary findings. Language careful. Responsibility named. Safeguards ordered. Referrals made. Not justice yet, but movement. The word movement echoed like a door unlocking. Outside, cameras waited. I offered a single sentence and no more. We're focused on safety. I took no questions. Boundaries held. That night, I cooked pasta and let my daughter sprinkle cheese until it snowed. We ate at the counter. She told me a story about a bird that learned new routes after a storm. I listened. She smiled without apology. Healing had weight and shape now. Before sleep, I taped a new note inside my notebook. Protect the ordinary. I checked locks, then left one light on, not from fear, but as a promise that darkness doesn't decide our hours. I knew the final step was close. Accountability rarely arrives alone. It brings consequences and clarity. Tomorrow would ask for both. I breathed, closed the book, and chose rest. Resolve doesn't rush. It arrives prepared, and it stays with us, shaping mornings, guarding evenings, and reminding us that safety is built, not granted. I set my phone face down, dimmed the lamp, and pictured tomorrow without fear. The work ahead would test patience, demand honesty, and reward steadiness. I welcomed it because protecting her meant choosing the long road, even when shortcuts glittered. Sleep came quietly, earned, and I held that quiet like a shield, trusting the path I had chosen would carry us forward, together, awake, aware, and unbroken, whatever storms gathered, whatever voices shouted, whatever nights lingered. I rested, ready to stand again, calmly, clearly, when morning asked. Preparedness was my answer, love my compass, and truth my ground. Always. For her, for us, forward. Morning light crept through the curtains like a quiet witness. The phone buzzed once, then again. Messages, calls, updates. I already knew what they meant before I picked it up. The final decision had arrived. I read it slowly, every word feeling heavier than it looked. Charges confirmed, protective measures upheld, case referred to prosecution. For a moment I didn't move. The air around me felt still, dense, like the house itself was holding its breath. My daughter walked in, sleepy, but smiling. She didn't ask what the message said. She didn't have to. She saw it in my face, the calm after the storm. I made her breakfast the way she liked, extra syrup, too much butter, and she laughed when it dripped down her hand. It was such a small sound, but it filled the room like music. That laugh was my victory. Not the ruling, not the words. Her laugh. Her peace. Later I stepped outside. The air was crisp, sky washed clean. Neighbors nodded from a distance. Some smiled awkwardly, unsure what to say. Others said nothing at all. That was fine. People don't need to understand your journey to respect your direction. The man was gone. Moved out overnight, they said. The house across from the park sat empty, blinds drawn. I felt no triumph, only quiet release. Rage had burned itself out long ago, replaced by something steadier. Vigilance. Love with discipline. I spent the next weeks rebuilding routines. Therapy sessions became lighter. My daughter drew pictures again. Bright colors, open skies. She named one after the rain. I framed it. It hung near the door, a reminder that even storms can leave something beautiful behind. At night, when the house settled into silence, I'd sit by the window with my notebook. The last page was still blank. I stared at it for days, unsure how to end something that had rewritten everything. Then one evening, I wrote a single line. Rage began this story, but love finished it. I closed the book and felt no urge to open it again. There were no more fights to pick, no more shadows to chase. Just a father, a daughter, and a promise kept. The world outside still carried danger and noise, but inside, peace had roots now. Strong ones. My daughter slept without fear. I smiled, exhaled, and whispered to the dark. Words not of anger, but gratitude. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about vengeance. It was about transformation. About what happens when a father chooses not just to fight, but to protect, rebuild, and love harder than fear ever could. And with that, I turned off the light. If you felt the heat of this story, hit like, because real victories start when we stand together. Subscribe to Karen's Story Hub to follow every jaw-dropping moment from my Karen files. And tell me below, how would you handle a Karen trying to control your life?